No, we're not doing this stuff.
You seem like you want to.
No, I don't want to. So welcome to the Mink and the Monk. That's the name of this podcast, Larry, in case you didn't know that.
I did know that, yes.
All right. I'm one of your hosts, Matt Fink.
I'm Brad Monkel.
And today we're very pleased to have my high school band teacher, but I also have played gigs with you. I don't remember what came first.
High school band teacher. First.
I can't remember because I kind of grew up over at that hotel, and I might have played with you on one of those. Anyway, we have the much-loved Mr. Larry Balestra with us today. So thank you for doing the podcast. Welcome to the show.
Yes, welcome.
Thanks for inviting me. This is kind of exciting, I'm sure.
Yeah. It might not be. You might regret it. You might. Well, give it time.
I'm hoping not.
Yeah, I started a podcast with my former teacher, and look where that got me.
Oh, jeez. There you are.
That's right. That's how I met Brad. He was were you a freshman when I first met you and going into?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what year was that?
2015.
2015. So I met Larry in 1989 as a senior in high school.
Yeah, that's right.
That's horrific that it was like in the snap of a finger.
Oh, well, when I see kids who are having kids and realize that, I had you in the 5th grade through 12th grade. Yeah. And now you're a mom and you're a grandmother now. Oh.
Yeah, it sneaks up on you.
Jeez.
Yeah. So very cool. I've been wanting to do this with you, and I wanted to talk about the importance of music education in the schools. When we see, I was on the board of ed here. I saw how a lot of times on the first thing to get cut is usually the music or the art programs, as if that
I remember.
Yeah, you had to fight some wars, I'm sure. And when I was on the board, I would kind of check in with the other music teachers just to see if there was anything I could do to advocate for those programs. But it seems to be that from a state ed point of view, that there's no math or science involved in music, maybe. And I don't understand why that happens. But let's start with...
I'll tell you a funny story about the math and science aspect of that.
Oh, I would love to hear a funny story. Do you want to? Yeah, go ahead. Let's hear
this. So when computers first hit the scene, schools really didn't have them yet. Yep. But they were coming, and there was a thing where you could apply for a grant from IBM, who was up in Kingston at the time, and you could apply for a grant for your department. So I applied. I said, well, that's pretty cool. Well, first when I went to get the application, I forget who I went to, but they said, well, you're not this is not science teaching or math. I said, yeah, I know, but there's a lot of applications we can use in music. And then even when I made the application out, I sent it in, and I got a call from a woman who was doing them and said, well, let me try to understand how does music fit into math and science. I said, well, it's totally like math and science.
Yeah.
You've got counting, you've got acoustics, you've got all kinds of things. And, we can teach the kids, they can do their own compositions and everything. And so I finally got, she wanted a real explanation as to why the music department would deserve to get a grant. And,
right.
And apparently I fooled her. And we got one.
Did you? What year was that? I remember computers coming into the school. I was in 8th grade or so. That would have been, 1985?
Yeah, I think this was more like, I got to round out in 85. So this was more like in the early 90s, like 93, maybe 94, when we got one. And it was cool.
And was recording even talked about? Digital recording even talked about as probably not even a possibility yet, right?
Not yet.
CDs were out, but recording to hard drive wasn't. Probably was that a thing? Right?
Not yet.
So that would have been another. That was an argument before that was even.
And ironically, the students knew more about computers at that point than I did.
Well, yeah, we grew up on them.
I had to literally sit home like a whole week with the manual and try things and fail. Yeah. Before I would even be brave enough to bring it into the school. Yeah.
Yeah, it's different. This guy's probably his baby videos are on YouTube.
Right.
So it's very different technology.
I don't even know that much. I'm having computer issues right now.
Are you? Really?
Like a little bit. I'm fine, but it's just I like, the real stuff. I'm not, I don't know what I'm doing. But was there anything that you could apply in music classroom with a computer at that point, or was it like recordings?
It was like sequencing. We played around with.
Okay.
We played around with student composition. I also got a couple of what was the big thing back then? It was for the kids in the jazz ensemble. It was a software they could improvise to.
Okay.
And play along. So that was kind of cool. So I had it in a room where they could go and they could turn it on and do their thing, and they could actually print out the sheet music for like the standard and bring it home with them. So we started there, and then after that, shortly after that, we got a computer lab at the school. And
this is the high school.
In the high school,
yeah, because I remember a computer lab coming into the middle school, which is where I would have been at that time.
And now it's just, my grandson, who's 7 now, he's got his own iPad from the school that he brings home, and he'll grab my wife's phone and say, "No, Mimi, let me show you how to do that." It's like, so he's already, literate in all digital, forms.
Yeah. He's setting up airdrops to war-torn areas for food. It's you just grew up on it. The 7-year-old has more awareness. Probably.
It's just incredible. It's
I just pictured airdropping on the iPhone, like airdrop a picture of food.
I'm sure it's been done.
I'm sure it has. Yeah, I'm sure you could operate a drone from the power of the latest iPad. I'm sure it's possible.
Yeah, what are you doing for Ukraine?
That's right. That's terrible.
I'm sorry.
No, I brought it up myself.
But I don't know how far back you wanted to go, but do you remember when you first saw Matt as a student, your first impression of him as a musician?
Oh yeah, he was you could tell that he was had already caught the bug, so to speak. He told me a little bit about his history in the middle school, and it was kind of I think you began on the flute, didn't you?
I did.
Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting. Yeah,
with Kathy Thomas.
Yeah, and that was kind of short-lived.
I did that for 2 years, and at the time, those 2 years didn't feel short-lived. But yes, in hindsight, it's. But my father was a professional flautist, so I think that would have been 4th grade.
Yeah, and I had I always felt honored when I got to sub for a wonderful friend of mine, Gene Randolph, at the Granite Hotel, and I'd be on the bandstand with his dad, and his dad was an enormously wonderful player.
Yeah,
and I always learned something every time. No matter how mundane the music might be, there was something that I would be listening for, and he would just, I thought, wow, how did that happen? Like a little turn of a phrase or something. Anyway, so when Matt came in to my program, he was pretty much knew a lot about music, either vicariously or by having done it. And he was a guitar player, and he at that point, I think he was doing
just
a lot
naive enough to think I knew what I was doing.
I would find him sitting, during a study hall on the floor of the band room with his guitar, and he'd be got the tablature there and everything, and we started talking about do you read music? And he did read music, to a little, but not, to me, guitar has always been the mystery instrument anyway. My brother's a guitarist, and I just don't know how you guys do that. But
I don't know if you knew what I used to do, though. I read fine on the flute.
Right.
So when you gave me music, I would go home, tell me if this makes sense, I would go home and read it on the flute and then teach it to myself by ear on the guitar.
That makes sense, yeah.
Because I couldn't read, I didn't understand how reading, I still don't, and I read fine on the guitar, but I don't think it's the most natural system to use for the guitar. A tablature system makes way more sense and it's way easier.
Right.
So, you can write rhythms in tab. So what you don't get is the idea of the key signature, I guess. but whatever. Reading your charts, whatever charts you had, it didn't have a lot of guitar stuff in them, other than chords.
Right.
But when I had a part that I had to read and double with someone, that's what I would do.
Yeah, and he did it wonderfully. I mean, it was great to have. He at that time, even as a young kid, he really played a nice blues, and
I liked blues a lot. That's what I spent most of my time doing.
And so whenever there was an opportunity to feature him on a guitar solo, boom,
I remember you used to let me play on Groove Merchant.
Mm-hmm.
You had a great chart for this Thad Jones. That's a Thad Jones.
That's like the first song I ever read when I started playing bass in jazz band in high school.
It's a great chart.
I love the Groove Merchant.
So I remember like it was yesterday, and I think you would let me. I mean, I don't remember exactly, but that was a good bluesy-ish kind of place to take a guitar solo. I remember the first day in that band. I was like Liam. My friend Liam Wood,
Liam Wood, oh gosh, yeah.
Right, Liam played keyboard in that band, and we started hanging out. And he said, "Why don't you, I don't know why it didn't occur to me. It was my senior year in high school." And he said, "Why don't you, get in the band?" And then I did, and it was really it was life changing as far as like having this place to hang out in school where you could go and be amongst like-minded people, and. Not that things weren't safe, but it was a place you were amongst the same. Everybody kind of had the same vibe.
Yeah, I try to make it as comfortable as possible, and when he was in the group, I think it's hard sometimes. I remember kids, but sometimes I don't remember where they were on the timeline.
Yeah.
But I think that was
30,
also the band
33 years ago.
Like Greg Glassman.
Greg Glassman's a little bit younger than me,
okay.
So I don't know. Like since I was a senior, honestly I don't think I met Greg until after he had graduated.
Okay.
But I think he's 4 years younger than me.
Okay.
Or maybe 5, and at the time that would have been a huge difference.
Yeah, sure.
But now it's not. But yeah, that's right. You would have had Greg Glassman.
Yeah, and I was really fortunate to. I mean. Again, music is always sometimes the place where, you got a lot of motivated kids usually end up there. Some kids more motivated than others, obviously, but it was always a place where, the music itself was the universal thing that brought everybody together. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted it. My dad was a music teacher. And,
I didn't know that.
And also a wonderful musician. He was a charter member of the Syracuse Symphony. Wow. He was a principal tuba player for the Syracuse Symphony. And oddly enough, when he got out of the Army, he went to Syracuse University, then World War II happened, and then he left. And then he came back and finished up. There was no tuba teacher at Syracuse University at the time.
Wow.
So he would take the train once a month to New York and study with Bill Bell, who was the principal for the New York Philharmonic. And then come back, and do his other studies. And then after graduation, he actually became the first tuba professor at Syracuse University.
Is that right?
Yeah. So, and he taught there for probably 25 or so years. So I got,
I didn't realize that your
whole
pedigree was. had no idea.
Oh yeah, my dad and my mother was, she was a stay-at-home mom, but she was also a kick-butt piano player. She could read anything. She used to read orchestral reductions from my father so he could hear the parts and stuff.
No kidding.
Yeah, she was an amazing piano player.
I had no idea. So that makes sense. So you and your brother, did you play drums then when you were? That was your first instrument?
I started on tuba actually, but it was hard to get a lesson from my dad because he was so busy. So he would give me a whole bunch of stuff to do. I'd practice it. And practice it. And Dad, are we going to have a lesson this week? Oh, I can't this week, son. I got a recording session and blah, blah, blah. So, okay, how about next week? Well, maybe. And so I got kind of frustrated, and my friend up the street needed a drummer for a rock and roll band.
That'll do it.
So I said, Dad, I think I'm going to quit.
Yeah, drums are a little more social, probably. I'm guessing... that this is what, like the mid '60s that this is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were. Are you a Beatles, Elvis?
I was no. My buddy was all. The Beatles were not our friend. It was kind of funny.
You were coming just
yeah,
shy
we were
of
like
that.
the Ventures.
Yes.
And
okay.
Johnny and the Hurricanes and all the instrumental bands basically.
So were you doing gigs in high school?
Yeah, we would do the Catholic school dances. And stuff like that. That was a big deal.
Yes. And this is all in the Syracuse area?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And my dad said, well, if you're going to be a drummer, you better be a good one. Because they're a dime a dozen. So I said, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to try,
Yeah.
But the teaching aspect, the mantra I always try to live with was something my dad said to me when I was first starting my career. He said, listen, try to remember you're not really teaching them music. You're teaching them about life. And you're using music as the vehicle. And I always thought that was pretty cool, probably one of the coolest things my dad ever said.
Yeah.
And I kept that with me because that seemed to be how it worked. And I tried to find, good music for the kids to play. I mean, once in a while I'd throw in some of the more cheesy, rock and roll arrangements. And that was always a disaster usually.
Really?
Yeah. Like with the jazz band, one time the kids wanted to do something, some tune, and I bought it, and we tried it, and it was just horrible because, you can't really recreate the sound of synthesizers and all that stuff back then.
Gotcha.
So I would go for things like Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, and we would play that, and Boogie Stop Shuffle, and they loved that stuff. I mean, the kid, because it was
Mingus?
because it was good music.
Yeah.
And that was another thing my dad said. He said, give them quality music, even if it's hard, because even though they might not know it, if it's quality, if it's really good quality and you love it, like don't try to do stuff you don't love because it won't come across. They won't see that, and that usually was true too. Like if I was really into a piece, and kids saw that, they would at least give it a try.
Wow.
Which was good, and sometimes it turned out to be. Sometimes it was a real surprise. I mean, I remember we did one year, The Barber of Seville.
Uh-huh.
And it was, a tough piece, and I really didn't know if we could do it or anything like that. But they pulled it off, and we did it at a concert, and years later, like freshman kids would say, "Are we going to do that again?"
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic advice, though. You're very lucky that your dad knew exactly what he was talking about.
Yeah, he was a good role model, and.
Well, it comes across because I don't have any. You didn't have. If I'm thinking about my time in the band, you were happy if we were happy checking stuff out. You didn't want us to be into you didn't have these stringent kind of things. No. You were like, basically express yourselves, have fun. Let's mm-hmm. There was no I don't know. I don't remember anything other than just encouragement.
But I learned that from a lot of other people. Like in 1985, myself and Tim Barconi,
sure.
And a woman named Willa Loescher, we wanted to put together an all-county jazz ensemble,
okay,
and an orchestra. And an all-county, and then Krista Kaye, another wonderful educator from Onteora, wanted to do a vocal jazz ensemble, mm-hmm. which were things that were just not, they hadn't really hit the scene yet. Now they have, but yeah. So we created the all-county jazz orchestra
I didn't know that.
festival, and so we had, our first conductor actually was a wonderful guy named Howard Johnson.
As in Howard Johnson?
Tuba player
Howard Johnson?
And Barry sax player, yeah.
Like legendary Howard Johnson.
Yeah.
He was in this area?
Oh, yeah, he lived in Woodstock. And I remember I called him up on the phone. Tim Barconi actually suggested him, and I called him up on the phone, and I told him what we were trying to do.
I didn't realize he was in the area. How did I not know that?
And he was really interested in it.
Wow.
He says, "Yeah, I'd like to do that. I'm working with kids, and And I said, yeah, I think you'd be digging. And I said, I have another. Once he got there and started working with the kids, it was a year where I don't know why, but we had an overabundance of tuba players in the county that were really fine.
Wow.
So as part of that first jazz ensemble concert,
Yep.
Howard had written a bunch of arrangements for, like, tuba ensembles, jazz arrangements. So we did. So he brought a couple in, and we got all these all-county tuba players, some of which couldn't be in the all-county band because there was just too many of them.
Yeah.
And we had them all play on that concert.
Wow.
And we did, he did an arrangement of Sir Duke.
Oh,
And
nice.
it was really hip.
Yeah.
And it was just wonderful. It was wonderful. And from there, it became a thing every year. We had it just about every year.
Yeah, I did all county for Greene County. I mean, I don't know. You said that was like the first.
Well, it was the first for Ulster County.
Okay.
This was our very first Ulster County all-county jazz ensemble, and it's still going. They still have it,
Wow.
which I'm kind of happy about that.
Yeah.
It was a big deal.
That's and it's like leaving an incredible mark. I mean, just like to have an opportunity at that age, especially to meet and play with Howard Johnson.
Oh, yeah. And not all of the schools at that time had jazz ensembles, because a lot of times they would feel maybe if the band teacher wasn't really well versed in jazz, not that I'm any expert, but they would feel intimidated. Like, well, I can't have a jazz ensemble because I don't know anything about it. I said, well, you can learn. There's like thousands of books out there, and listen
and recordings
and you'll do fine.
Yeah.
And so little by little, they started creeping up. Another guy that taught me a lot about, just having the kids do their own thing was a wonderful sax player named Arnie Lawrence.
Oh, sure.
He did one of the all-county jazz ensembles too.
Was Arnie was in the Woodstock area as well?
He actually lived over near Sundown.
Oh, over here, Sundown?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he had a place up there, and a friend of mine who lived out that way when I taught at Dry Valley, I had his kids in the band, and so Charlie suggested, he says, I got a friend, Arnie.
Is this Charlie Nicely?
No,
Oh.
it was a wonderful guy named Charlie Pierre.
Okay.
Who's no longer with us, but he suggested Arnie Lawrence, and so
Arnie's bad.
Yeah, called him up. I actually had to pick him up at the house to drive him over. I was living, I think, still in Grahamsville at the time, so that worked out good. And he did a thing, just total improvisation. He did a couple of charts too, great charts, and he also did a thing where they just improvised on a blues. And during the concert, the kids really got into it to the point where Arnie starts. We were used to do them in the gym at the Ulster County Community College.
Yep.
So the bands were up on the stage. So Arnie got off the stage, and the kids all followed him, and we were dancing around the whole auditorium, the whole gym floor, and back on the stage, and finished the tune. And some people were kind of surprised because they'd never seen that done before.
Yeah.
And, usually you sit there and you play and then you're done. But he just got done, and it was just great.
That is great.
It was.
I bet those students never forgot
I remember
that.
Standing there, just almost in tears. Like, this is more than I could have imagined.
And you just like sounded him about doing it at one point, and he was into it.
Yep.
That says a lot.
Yeah,
It says a lot about the people in your community, and
we were kind of, I don't know. I guess we were friends. And I saw him again at one of the NISMA conferences, and we hung out together.
Was he there in what capacity, as a judge, or
no? He just came to check out.
Really?
I think Pete. Oh God, forget his last name.
saxophone player?
Yeah, and he wrote a bunch of books.
I'm not sure.
I should know, but anyway, he was just there because so we just hung out.
I met Arnie in the city at a Vespers concert, when I was living down there, and then I worked with his son is Eric, and Eric played in the Big Bang Jazz Gang that we used to do, and I don't know if you ever were at one of those. That was Robert Kopech.
Was that Bob Kopech?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was in Kingston.
Yeah, they were great.
Eric, and then I played a couple other things with Eric, but Eric plays in I think he's in Little Feat now. But Arnie and my father, Ronnie, knew each other. I mean,
They must
that
have,
went
yeah,
back,
sure.
way back.
In fact, I have a picture of Arnie Lawrence and Bobby Johnson Jr.
Oh,
When they played together, because I think he did a short stint at the Granite Hotel
okay.
way back
Wow.
in the day.
So some of these people you probably don't know, but Bobby Johnson Jr. was the trumpet player. And it's funny that his last name, that he went by Junior, because he was, when I met him, he was solidly in his 80s.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure.
Yeah. He had played in, so what were some of the big bands he played in the 40s, right?
Yeah. He was in, oh gosh, was it Erskine Hawkins? Maybe?
Okay. That makes sense.
He was on the road with him. He actually did a short stint in the Duke Ellington band. And he used to joke about, he says, yeah, when I left the Duke Ellington band, my replacement was Miles Davis.
Really? I didn't even know Miles did a stint in that. That would be amazing.
And Bobby did the very first recorded solo on a Harmon mute.
Really?
Yep, it was in Chicago in 1954. Wow. They had done a show the following night. This is Bobby telling the story to me.
Bobby had great stories. You would just sit, and I would sit as a kid, as a 12-year-old, in the band room, and he would just talk. Some of the things that he would tell me, I couldn't probably repeat, even with the not safe for kids warning that would be on. Bobby was raised, I believe, so either his grandmother or his mother, he was brought up sort of the same way Richard Pryor was, like in a brothel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some of it was great advice.
It was great.
It was great advice. But at 12, I probably wasn't. At 12, he was creating this advice at 12. But at me at 12, it wasn't going to help me for a few more years. But you could have any conversation with Bobby backstage, and it was incredible. Like, I grew up, so these bands that he's talking about, you had legends working in them, because that's where all the work was up here. You wouldn't recognize it now, but 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, how many hotels were there?
Oh, God.
Hundreds, right?
Yeah, it must have been.
Hundreds.
Big ones, small ones, and Bobby.
This sounds like some of Bobby's advice. Go ahead, big ones,
Bobby,
small ones.
But I think he came up like it was going to be like a temporary thing, and
everybody had the same story. This was we're good. We got to get for the summer. We're going to get my family out of town. We're going to go do. And then 20 years later, like my father played in I can't remember the amount of bands that he was in, but I mean, legends, absolute straight up jazz legends were making their way through these. Like, well, Roswell Rudd was in the Granite Band, and Frankie Dunlop, the drummer with Thelonious Monk, that he was up here at some point in the 60s into the 70s, I guess. You could make good money, like money where you could have a family kind of money. There was that many bands.
I remember as a kid, when I was going to college and going to be a music major, and one of my father's friends, who was a clarinet player, this is in Syracuse, was telling me, like, okay, man, like, you got to come down to the mountains in the summers.
Right.
Because I guess apparently he traveled down here, and he said, you're going to make a lot of money. It's great. A lot of.
Well, they put you up.
Yeah.
Did he live on the grounds? He
must have lived in one of the.
They had bungalows for
housing.
Musicians would stay on the grounds, and you'd eat. And play.
And that was his summer, but I never really did that. I mean, I ended up in Grahamsville, and really didn't have a lot of experience in the hotels. Mm-hmm. And so I met a lot of these guys, like his father, like Bobby, like Roswell. Like later, like after the first 14 years in Grahamsville, I moved here, and then I started subbing around, and then I got to meet these guys, and it was just wonderful.
Yeah.
I always went in with the attitude that I'm going to learn something tonight. Yeah. And I did. I mean, there was very rarely a moment where I didn't learn something and gain some good experience.
Every night you had a
great story.
You had two headliners, right? Every night. And great stories from Bobby. I didn't mean to cut you off there, because you don't want to cut off the Bobby Johnson stories. No. But every night, 6 nights a week, or it might have even been 7, I'm not sure, but you always had a cocktail party, a dance set, a comedian, and then a singer, and then a late dance set, and then you would have a Latin band in the bar next door to the nightclub, and then you would have a rock and roll band in another club. So there was at least 4 working bands during the course of an evening.
Yeah.
And each one of those bands had at least 5 to 9 people in it. So that was every night. So
and great players.
That was every hotel. Multiply that by all the different hotels. You know?
And everyone was busy. You know, you weren't looking for a gig, you had one.
So as a player, you were in the hot seat. You'd come in and sub, and you would have to read.
Oh God, yeah.
And the charts have pencil marks from the hundreds of thousands of other gigs prior, where notes and then cues and I need a rim shot when the balloon breaks, but not before the bird flies around. Like all these, like you had all. It was like I wouldn't say vaudeville, but they were live comedian sets and singers. It was crazy. It was a lot of stuff going on.
My first hotel gig was at the Browns, and I was an augment on percussion. So I was playing timpani, and you know that was my jam in college. I was timpanist for all the
Gotcha.
I just I love those things. You know?
Yeah.
So I'm playing timpani, I'm playing xylophone, and it was a female impersonator, right?
Yeah.
So we're going along, and the music director is, and I'm just fresh out. This is like my second year out of college or third year out of college. I didn't know what to expect. And I'm, trying to get it right. And all of a sudden, and the guy was getting mad at me because I guess I was taking too long to tune and stuff. So we had a break.
You were a professional.
and we had a break, and there was this wonderful drummer, which you probably know, Joe Anello.
Sure.
So Joe...
Costa Rican now, right?
Yeah,
Moved down
so
to
Joe
Costa Rica.
was there, and he said, look, Larry, listen, you sounded great, man, but forget about it. Just play loud. Get a decent fifth or a fourth, and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
And so
Great advice.
Followed his advice, and that was good to go.
Yeah,
but,
you were there was a real there was experience that you just couldn't get anywhere else. You were under a lot of stress to get it. I remember watching those. I actually learned a lot just from watching, because I would go to the hotel all the time, or whenever my father would take me to work. Sure. But just to see those rehearsals and watch how the guys that knew the show were annoyed that it was taking so long, and then and or just trying to get the cues right, and then the acts. I mean, I've spoken about this before. I mean, like I met Milton Berle, hung out with him watched his 3-hour rehearsal and his show, and Tito Puente used to do the Latin weekend there, and you could see some amazing things. Yeah, amazing things.
But let me finish this Bobby story.
Oh yes, sorry. Yep.
So they played the night before. Bobby explains it that everybody was pretty much wasted, and they had a early radio show.
The Bandit?
The Bandit.
Oh.
Yeah, they were doing a radio show, and so Bobby went up to play his solo, and he says, I usually use a harmon, or no, I usually use a straight mute. Mm-hmm. He walked up to the mic, and this is like 8 o'clock in the morning, and he forgot his mute. So one of the guys in the trumpet section threw him a harmon mute, and he played the solo on harmon. The tune is called Tippin' In, and it was like one of the first harmon mute solos.
I'll have to check that out. I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Bobby shared other stories with me, but not the harmon mute story.
Well, he had some. There was a couple when he used to play at this, or he used to be the band leader at one of these places down in Harlem. There was a funny story about that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm very sure. I wonder how a man like that made his way, probably the same way that everybody else did, making their way through these hotels in this area, just coming up at some point. It was nice to get out of the city if you were doing that grind.
And he was a really great man. I mean, I always felt good. He didn't drive. He never had a driver's license because he never needed one.
Well, that makes sense.
City. So when he was on a gig or something, a lot of times I was his driver.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We actually did a movie in the late 80s, I think it was, maybe early 90s, but it was called The Pallbearer, and it had a live band. It was John Ferrara playing piano.
I love John.
And Bobby was there, and Myron Ewells, the trombone player.
I don't know who that is. Yeah.
He was in the band, and the wonderful bass player moved to Portland, or I don't know.
Still around or no?
No, he passed away.
He was an older guy, though?
Yeah, he was.
What, Dudley?
No, it wasn't Dudley.
Okay, I'm just going through bass players.
But he was the boss on the job.
Okay.
Anyway, so Bobby was there and the whole band, and we were basically just supposed to be, window. It was supposed to be a wedding band in the background, but during the breaks and stuff, and when nothing was happening, we would play.
Yeah.
Right. So the director says, like, you guys can really play.
Oh.
And I said, yeah. The guy said, well, yeah, we can. He said, oh, well, we want you to play live on the movie then. So immediately, I didn't know anything. Like, I said, oh, that's fun,
Yeah.
And so the guy who was in charge of us, the bass player, said, well, we got to renegotiate then. Because now you're
you have
talking
airtime.
Right, now you're talking.
Yeah.
So we got this thing. Like he said, well, we want a name. We want to be in the credits. And we want to be called the Real Band, REEL. And sure enough, at the very end, once you get all through the credits of the movie, there's the whole band.
This is a movie called The Pallbearer.
The Pallbearer. It was David Schwimmer and Gwyneth Paltrow were the two lead characters.
How do I not know this about you?
And Mike Rappaport.
Wow.
So it was fun. It was fun. It was like grueling. It was 2 days of 16 hours. And
Filmed around here somewhere.
No, it was down in the city.
Oh, okay.
On 86th Street.
But you're in it. I can see you.
Yeah. Actually, in fact, ironically enough, my wife laughs because I probably have the most airtime of any of the people.
Did you have
I had a ponytail back then. Yeah.
Yes, I remember that.
I had the ponytail back then. Yep.
Cool.
And it was interesting. It was really interesting to see the whole process because, we all had to take our shoes off when we were walking across the floor because they didn't want to hear the noise of feet. So you see these people dancing and they're all in their socks.
And you brought Bobby Johnson to this?
We drove down, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How cool is that? How do I not know that about you? That's
was very cool. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So all of these things, I guess, in one way or another, kind of fortified this amazing. I've always just loved music. Music has always been like, I don't know that I could live without it.
You probably couldn't. Makes sense.
Even like during the COVID thing when there was no one to play with and there was no place to play, I would go down to my studio and just play. It's sometimes ridiculously, but play. And just to hear it or sit at the piano and just plunk out whatever meager chords that I knew. So it's always been something that I think is very important and for kids, like you were saying before, for some kids it is the only place where it's like a refuge. It's a place they can go that's safe.
That's how I felt about your band room. That's
it's
exactly
a place
what
they can go to express themselves and a lot of times I ended up being a guidance counselor. Kids would talk to me about everything, and it was like a sacred kind of honor that I always kind of held very dear. Like they would bare their souls and you would try to figure out something that what can I say that might help you, and sometimes you couldn't say anything. You could just listen. And that's all you had to do, and there's just, I always felt, there was never a bad kid. They might be trouble sometimes, and this and that, but there was always a reason. Like I always looked for, like, if a kid hadn't practiced, like, let's say, or they didn't know the stuff that I thought they should know by the next week. It wasn't necessarily that they didn't want to, because you don't know when they leave their house in the morning. Their mom and dad could have just had a fight. They could be going through all kinds of things. So it's not because necessarily they didn't want to do it. They couldn't. They weren't able. But then they would get into that lesson or that band room, and we would do something, and all of a sudden you could see it. This weight was lifted off, and they were in the music. Yeah. They weren't home anymore. They were in their own space. Yeah. And they could control that space, and that was what was important.
And they were encouraged in that space.
Right. And I've been blessed. So many kids It's nice to, I mean, probably the only good thing about Facebook is the fact that I've come back in touch with so many of my former students. And they're great. They're doing wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, the last few years, well, except for the 2 years that nobody was doing anything, but a former student of mine from Tri Valley, I mean, I started him on trumpet in the 5th grade, and all the way up to senior year, because I was the only guy there. And so now he teaches music in Washingtonville in the elementary school.
Oh.
And I think he's going to retire this year, which is also very scary. Like, what? But he's called me to play their high school musicals. And so it's wonderful watching him because, he's conducting this group of professional guys, and they all respect him. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, what a trip, man. Like I'm watching this kid that I knew when he was just a kid.
Yeah.
And now he's a grown guy, a tremendous musician. And it's just such a thrill.
Yeah.
This whole circle, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just such a thrill to see them doing well. Like kids like Greg,
Yeah.
the
Greg's
things
a daddy now and lives in Brooklyn. Yeah.
The things that he's doing. I had a student, his name was Darren Whittington.
Okay.
And he's doing a lot of producing. And one time, years ago, he sent me, one of those framed platinum recordings that you get if you're on somebody's thing. So he apparently did some arranging and some keyboard playing on one of Britney Spears' songs that sold like, 1 million copies. So he sends me this plaque. And I said, "What, Darren? What do you? What's this?" He goes, "Well, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have gotten this." So, just these gifts that you don't expect, because you don't know. Like any teacher, I mean, whether it's music or anything, I mean, you don't really know if you're helping a kid sometimes until way later, if you find out at all.
No, you're watering seeds. You don't know what could.
You don't really know, and all of a sudden these surprises come along, and it's like, oh my gosh, wow. Okay, I didn't mess up that badly. I mean, I definitely messed up. Everybody, definitely.
Yeah, look at Matt.
Yeah, it's true. This is your fault.
Yeah, right. But yeah, that was. I had a good job. I just was so. It was. You have bad days and good days, but there was never a day that I didn't like teaching music.
Yep.
I never knew how many days it was to the end of the year.
Yeah.
I never cared.
I remember you saying that to me whenever we spoke about doing this, and I was like, I'm not rolling like that. I know exactly.
But it's, and a lot of guys aren't in it because it's different now.
Yeah.
There's a different feeling.
Well, these last 2 years have been a little bit
they've hurt.
More exhausting than previous years.
Yeah, well, like I said, I don't know that I would have been able to survive it.
Yeah, you would have. You would have. I mean, but you would have found a way because that's what you did. But it wasn't fun.
No. Oh, gosh. And I give people a lot of credit. I mean, the teachers that are still sticking with it, that's really commendable. Yeah. Because, there aren't a lot of, rewards. I mean, you get a paycheck and you get your summers off, but that summer off is usually spent thinking about the next year you gotta deal with. Yeah. My wife used to laugh. I'd have these band scores on the table out on the deck in the summer, and my coffee's there, and I got my pencil, and I'm going through, all of how I'm going to approach this when we get there in September. Because every, that's another thing. I mean, when you're a band director in high school, and even probably in college, every year is a new band. Yeah. You never have the same band. It's not like you, like Duke Ellington pretty much had the same band for a long time. Decades, so you could kind of mold that into the perfect machine. Yeah. You got, all these kids, and they get to be seniors, and they really starting to get it. Yep. And then they're gone.
They're gone, yeah. And I deal with the same thing. Yeah. It's like 4 years later, now they can really bring something to they found who they are and enjoying themselves,
Yeah.
and then it's bittersweet.
And you're starting all over.
It's
It's a whole new band.
Yeah.
You know?
And I teach a guitar ensemble, so I spend the first 3 years telling these guys to turn down. So by their senior year,
Is that a thing with guitar players?
Yeah, they keep. But it's a thing with 12 guitar players in a room.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, you were in that? You played bass.
Yeah.
Like we don't need to mention names, but there are certain people that just took years to just get them to turn their volume knob off while we were trying to have a conversation. But little things like that, by the time they get it, then they're off and up out.
Yeah.
What were you going to say? You had a question a second ago.
Oh, well, I mean, one thing I was wondering about, like, your time teaching was how big was, like, each class, like, each grade at that school?
Well, Roundout wasn't they didn't have a huge population at that point, but they had a pretty decent sized one. And when I started there, IBM was still in full swing. So we had a lot of kids that, IBMer kids, and all walks of life. There was a lot of diversity. Roundout's also, I don't know if it still is, but it used to be the largest physical school district in the state. It was like 400 square miles of school district.
Really?
So some of the kids are on the bus for quite a long time. And the school, because it was so huge, the school was really the place where any socialization would happen.
Yeah.
Kids would get together. Like if you lived on the edges of Warsing, you might not really know a kid that lives on the edge of Kingston, and that's how big it was. Or Woodstock or so forth. So when you got to school, that was where everybody got to know each other and all of that stuff.
Well, at my high school, I think my graduating class was on the small side. It was like 60-something kids. And
we had like maybe 100, in the hundreds.
Okay.
Maybe
My class size was 117, I believe.
117.
If I remember correctly, something along those lines.
Well, and I was like one of 3 kids in the class who was interested, like had serious interest in music. And there were definitely other people who pulled their weight in ensembles, but what kinds of transformations would you see with like a student's motivation at that age? Or do you feel like people, once they're kind of set in a certain way, they stay that way, or would you see people flip, or you'd have certain ways of getting people to kind of change their view of things?
Well, it's weird. My first 14 years was 5 through 12.
Okay.
So I taught beginners, I taught in the middle, I taught the more advanced players, and I also taught 7th and 8th grade classroom music. So, which you might not even have a kid that's in the band in that group. Yeah. I learned a lot there. That was the training ground. When I got the Roundout, it was almost like high school. That's a piece of cake, man. Like four grades. That's all I got to do. Well, I mean, it wasn't that easy, as I found out. Probably my fault, but no. Most kids came in, and I would see, most of the time there would be an improvement, a transition. They might come out of the middle school, and then into the high school, and then all of a sudden they kind of dug what was happening in the high school, and some of their friends would tell them about it, like, oh, wait till you get to the all that kind of crazy stuff. And then all of a sudden they kind of got caught into the family. And
did you teach? Well, you had the jazz band. Did you have a different band as well, or was that?
I had a concert band too.
You had a concert band. Okay.
So that could run, and some years, the average size was about maybe 65 to 70 players. I think one year I had like 80 something. That was a big group.
And then the jazz band was like 20, 18, something like that?
Yeah, it was. I had a hard time turning people away. So.
I was one of 3 guitarists in there. I think you had a couple of bassists, if I remember. So I know we used to switch off a lot.
Was Sean Gallagher one of the guitar players?
Yes.
Okay, so Sean, that's another.
So he was a little bit younger than me, but yeah, he was. It was me and him and Brian.
Sean was. It was another student that's amazing. John Bowman was the principal at that time.
Yep.
And John came to me and he said, "Listen, Larry, I got this kid. Yeah, he wants to be involved in the music program, And, so I want to bring him down. You have to meet him. He's a little different." And I didn't know what John was talking about really at the time. So in walks Sean. He's got leather pants,
long hair,
leather jacket, hair down to the middle of his back.
And he's in like 9th or 10th grade,
Yeah,
too.
and he's got one of those Iron Maiden kind of guitars, you know, the Maltese cross. You know?
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, so he was in the band. And, you know, now he's, I guess one of his compositions just won some kind of national or worldwide award. He's doing movie scores, and he lives in L.A.
Wow.
And he's totally doing a lot of stuff musically. And he just
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. You know, once in a while I'll see him on Facebook and stuff, and it's just incredible. You know,
I'll have to look him up. He probably would remember. I remember him, but I was only in there for the 1 year.
Yeah. So so we had the jazz band. You know, and that was funny too, because when I first started there was no jazz band. The first jazz band we used to do on a rotating period basis.
Okay.
So there was maybe 12 kids, and so you know one week we would meet first period, then the next week we'd meet second period, and so forth. Right. And it got to the point where I really wanted to make it into a class, and I went to the powers that be, and I said, look, you know, we could do a class, and the course director at the time was willing to try doing maybe a vocal ensemble, and they were also teaching theory at that point. So
this was Mr. Hensey?
Yeah. And I said, you know, we could have actually a sequence, a regent sequence in music by doing, you know, they could do their you know, the classroom thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually started a survey class in the early 90s on, you know, like music history and world music and stuff.
Wow.
So we actually had at one point, they might still have it, but we had an actual regent sequence that you could get.
I took the theory classes with Mr. Hensey.
Yeah.
I remember doing that.
Yeah, so they went for having jazz ensemble as an actual class. So we would have like band 3 days a week, and then jazz ensemble 2 days a week, and then the next week it would be jazz ensemble 3 days a week and band 2 days a week, and it worked. You know, it worked, and so we were able to get a lot more done then.
Wow.
You know, so that's what we did. Plus the lessons. So you know, we would do like group lessons, you know, trying to keep it as reasonable as possible. You know, you get 4 or 5 clarinet players at the same time. It gets a little rough.
It's a lot of clarinets.
There's a lot of clarinets. You know, but you know, that's how you could do it if you wanted to have every kid have some kind of an individualized lesson on their instrument.
Right.
So now, when you were taking something like that to, you know, the higher powers of the school and trying to get more people like in the general school public, like our community involved, is there any like common misconceptions or like tough points to sell to people when it comes to like trying to push music education?
I never thought it was that tough. I mean, it was all, like Matt said, there was always, you know, it's a special. So, you know, it's hard. It was hard sometimes for people to realize that, you know, this is a subject matter that could lead to some kind of a career. Not necessarily as a musician, but there's tons of things in music that, you know, there's music therapy, there's recording engineering, there's producing, you know, there's all kinds of things around
composition, like you were just talking about with Sean, and
that they can do, and you know, for a while, in the early days, I if a kid really was into music, I would always encourage them to you know, do it. Yeah. Just do it. You know, as time went on and it was harder and harder for there to be actual music jobs where you could make a living. I mean, there are still those jobs, but they're not like it used to be. Like Matt said, back in the early days when his dad was working at the hotel, he had a steady gig. Yeah. You know, if he didn't get any other gigs, he still had that.
He had a well-paying
Yeah.
gig. We had a nice
Yeah.
roof over our heads, food on the table.
Yeah.
We never wanted for anything, and that was his job.
Insurance. It was a real job.
And he worked 3 miles from the house.
Yeah.
So, he was home when he wasn't there. It wasn't that big a deal.
And that kind of changed, through the years. So, but there was still other things. There were always other options. And in fact, now I just did a thing a few weeks ago at Highland. A wonderful music teacher there, band director. His father was also a wonderful musician, Bob Schott.
Of course.
So his son
Yeah,
Dan
yeah.
is now teaching music at Highland.
Highland,
and they have this course called the music industry. So I played on their concert because what happens is that the students have to produce the whole thing, and they do the staging and they have to pick the tunes and the whole deal. So they actually really get a hands-on experience in what it's like to produce a musical event. And I thought, wow, that's like great.
That's amazing that they're able to get that done because
Yeah.
the budget for that, I'm surprised that it's there. That's wonderful.
It's well received too. I think this is maybe that was not the first year. I know they've done it before, maybe two or three times.
The students write the music?
They don't write the music necessarily, but they have to produce
They
the
have to
show.
play in a
and
pit band.
They have to play.
Yeah.
So the concert band is featured,
Wow.
and then they have a smaller like kind of pop group,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing song. The theme was the '80s, so everything was '80s music. Huey Lewis
Huey
and
Lewis,
the
sure.
News,
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. I want to dance with somebody, kind of
In
thing.
Houston, yeah.
And that was great, like to see, you got a concert band playing some of this stuff behind a smaller rock ensemble.
Yeah.
And we were lucky enough, or Dan was lucky enough, he asked Debbie Majors to come in and sing.
Great singer.
So she was, we featured her,
Yeah.
and it was a great concert. I mean, the parents just went crazy.
That's wonderful.
And the kids loved it. You could see it, like they were so into it.
Yeah.
So
they get to so much like you did when we were kids. They brought in live artists from the area to work with them.
And that was another thing I always thought was very important for the kids to see people that were doing it.
Yeah.
We used to do a Black History program every year, and Dick Wiggins, a wonderful vibes player, would come in, and his dad would play on the concert. Myself, Roswell, Betty McDonald would come in and play. Ambrose Jackson, who was a wonderful trumpet player, and Renee Bailey, and they would talk about stories. Like Renee would talk about her time in Thomasville, Georgia, when she was a kid, and coming up when she was on the road with like Sam and Dave Cook and all of that. And a lot of the kids from that time that were exposed to this, I mean, they still remembered it. I was like, wow, those were really cool things that we didn't know about.
I remember it like it was yesterday when you had your brother come in.
Yeah.
Who's a wonderful guitarist.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think I told you this, maybe I didn't tell you the other day. I remember the advice he gave me because he's a guitarist and I was playing guitar, and you had all of us. We played a chart where everybody got to play a little bit. I remember having a solo on it, and your brother said to me, maybe, venture outside of the one pentatonic scale that you know. And he didn't say it like in any other way other than like there's more to the fingerboard than just those 5 frets you were hanging out in. And I remember that. Like I don't remember if he played. I can't remember that. He must have though, right?
I think we did. I think we did a number with him on it.
But he gave us all great feedback, and I just remember it. Like you remember those experiences.
Well, I also, when I was the All-State Jazz Ensemble chairperson, I brought him in to do a clinic with the kids, the All-State Jazz kids, and same idea. I mean, and he was wonderful.
I remember him being lovely.
He made all these printouts for the kids and discography. And because that's what he did, he tried a short little stint of teaching, public school teaching, and
so did I. Yeah.
And that was not really his thing.
You have to do what you did. You have to have a stunning amount of patience and the ability. I'll just say this from an outsider's perspective, but you have to. you have to take care of your energy. You have to knowingly control how much energy you can put out, because that day starts at 8 and it doesn't always end at 4. But you have to really control how much it takes a lot of moderation, or self-moderating to do that.
And my brother really, he came up, he was a tuba major at Syracuse University.
So you both were on tuba.
Yeah, but he actually was a tuba major.
Wow.
Because there was no guitar teacher. I mean, he was into guitar. I mean, ever since he was a kid. I mean, he's probably going to kill me if he hears this, but he would literally sit on the toilet playing guitar and practicing. And at that time, we only had one bathroom. So we'd be pounding, come on, get out of there.
Were there just good acoustics in the bathroom?
Yeah, there was good acoustics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but so guitar was really his voice.
Yeah.
But to be a music major, the track he thought he wanted to do, he had to be a tuba major, which he was good at it, but he didn't like it.
Yeah.
And he studied with a guy who was the best guy in Syracuse at the time. And then later, he took lessons with Pat Martino and everything else. So he always wanted to play the guitar. So as soon as he got done with the formal tuba thing, I don't think he's ever touched a tuba again. And that's okay.
Guitar is a different animal. Like people are, you meet more people, I'm just going to say, playing guitar probably than you do tuba. Like the fans of guitar are all walks. And I learned that in your band room. Like I knew you would let us go out on the stage and just play. I don't know if right. So, but what was cool about that was girls would come in and hang out and listen to what you were doing. So would the guys, but when you realize you had an audience of people that were into what you were doing, like you kind of get, or I did anyway, you kind of get hooked on that. Like, oh, if I do this, you will come in the room. Yeah. So that's kind of I don't know if tuba is the same thing. I never played tuba.
No, I don't think so. But
yeah, I don't know. And my first guitar teacher is one of your musical compatriots for years, though. My first guitar lessons were Jeff Otis.
Oh God, yeah.
And Jeff was a legend in the area, and Larry and Jeff had a duo together for I forget how many years.
6 years.
6 years, yeah.
I think.
Larry, see, Jeff passed in what?
It's almost 8 years ago now.
Wow. But when I still have the music somewhere where he wrote out "Stairway to Heaven" for me in tab. I think I was 13 or 12, which was the way my father was. He's like, oh, you need guitar lessons. So he thought of the best guy that he knew in the area, and he lived in Ellenville.
Yep.
My dad would take me there, and my father hated rock and roll, but he was happy if you were practicing. So
Jeff was a wonderful guitar player who, again, because of guitar at the time, like most of the hotel bands did not have a guitarist.
Right.
So Jeff learned to play bass. And one of his first hotel gigs was with Bobby Johnson.
Oh, wow.
And Bobby bought him an amp so that he could play with him.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
So he played bass with Bobby at the Falls View, I think it was, possibly. And then when I knew him, we ended up on a couple of shows together, like high school shows, where he was playing guitar. In fact, I think in Hello Dolly he played guitar and he also played banjo.
Oh yeah, wow.
Something.
Yeah.
And I would pick him up in Ellenville and we'd drive to wherever the hell we had to go.
Yeah. No, I'm sure he was a lovely guest in the car. Like
it was funny because the whole duo thing, like the last thing I did with him, he said, we got to keep in touch, man. Like sometime we'll do something.
Yeah.
So. One time I get a call and it's Jeff. He goes, hey, Larry, you remember when I said, like, get together and we'll do something, I said, yeah. He goes, well, this is it. So, okay, what are we doing? So he had this little club that he was playing at, and it was owned by a singer, and she didn't want any loud, like, drum set or anything. So he says, can you think of something soft? And he doesn't want a bass player either, just guitar and percussion. So I had seen this video somewhere, and this guy was playing a djembe and with a hi-hat, and it was like, that's interesting. So we started doing it, and it worked. It was really a lot of fun.
Was it conversations?
Jazz conversations.
Jazz conversation.
Because it was like talking to your best friend in the living room.
Yeah.
And we didn't really care who was there. I mean, it didn't really matter to us if anybody was listening. We used to laugh, and we had a blast just playing. And a lot of it was, as we continued to play together, he would introduce tunes that he wrote, and then I would learn them, and then that would become a part of our repertoire. And more, when we would play out, we used to do a thing at the Aroma time when John Simon wasn't there, and in the winter. And so more and more of the tunes were Jeff's tunes, and then some standards.
Yeah.
And it was just great. We actually were lucky enough to record, before he passed, 11 of his original tunes.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, a friend of ours, Doreen Schofield.
Sure.
We did it in her living room.
Wow.
And she, did it on her computer.
Uh-huh.
And then a friend of mine remixed it so that it sounds pretty decent.
I'd love to hear that. I didn't know that you had that.
Yeah, and it's so that's my thing that I remember from him.
Yeah.
He was like we became really good friends. I mean, he was like a brother. He would come to our house for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. I mean, it was great. It was great and he got me back into fly fishing because he was a formidable fly fisherman. He used to be a guide up in Roscoe years ago.
Wow.
And he knew those rivers, and he was a great. I don't know how he was as a guitar teacher, but he was amazing. He was a great fly fishing teacher. I remember one time we were out on the river, and Jeff is very tall, and I'm pretty short.
When I first met Jeff, I was probably a foot shorter,
right?
So he was very So you're just looking up at this.
He'd be in the river, and I'd watch him downstream, and he's doing these beautiful casts, and I'd be up there, trying my best. So we were on the way home from a fishing night, and he was very subtle. He goes, "So Larry, listen, look, just wait a little bit longer on the back cast." That's all he said. I knew exactly what he meant.
Yeah.
And the next time we went out, I tried it, and I was getting those casts out there. And on the way home, he goes, "Yeah, see what I mean?"
Yeah, he didn't have he's funny.
He's very low key. I fell in the water one time, and I was soaking wet. And usually after these fishing jaunts, we would stop at this Chinese place because he lived in Pine Bush at the time, and we'd have something to eat. So we're on the way home. He goes, "Well, I guess we're not stopping for Chinese food tonight," because it was freezing.
Yeah.
But just very low key.
Yeah.
My kids loved him. My wife loved. I mean, he was just a great guy. He was great.
I remember him from that era, and then I hadn't seen him again. So this would have been like the early mid '80s.
Okay.
And then I'm on a gig in Middletown, and this person comes up to me, very tall man. You can see where I'm going with this. And he literally comes up to me and goes, "Can you still play Stairway, mother?" And I'm like,
yeah.
I was like, "Who is this?" And then I look at him like, "Oh my God, Jack!" It took me a second. I was 12 or 13 the last I had seen him, and now I was in my 30s when that happened. And we hung out at the bar and caught up, and he was always just a gentle spirit and a lovely. But it actually goes to show what you teaching in this area, but all that you could incorporate into your teaching with it's so many. I mean, just the people we've talked about, such a testament to the area and what you were able to tap into and bring to your students at Rondout.
One of his sons and me are still pretty close friends, and I remember when Jeff passed, I got a whole bunch of stuff from him, manuscripts and stuff. I have tons of things that he wrote or sketches that he did, and when I was looking through it, I found this sonata for guitar that he had written for his son. So I spent a bunch of time. I have a program, a notation thing, and I took it from this manuscript and rewrote it on the computer, and got a copy of it, and I sent the original and the newer version to his son, and it was just, he hadn't even known that he had written it for him. He didn't even know about it, and it was just one of those tear-jerking
Wow.
kind of moments that I was glad I did it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to get somebody to play it sometime.
It's a guitar piece?
Yeah. So if you want to take a look at it,
I'd love, please. I would love to. Like, I love Jeff. I mean, we didn't hang out for years, but he played an important role in my life, and I have nothing but fond memories of Jeff.
I'll get it to you.
I would love to play it.
It's I don't know, if it's guitar.
Well, send me the digital chart, and if my reading is still as bad as it was in high school, I'll lip sync. I'll let the computer play it, and I'll just look like I'm playing. I'll send it to you.
Okay, great.
You won't notice. Sibelius guitar is awful, so we won't do that. What else? Did you have something else? I'm sorry. I think I might have cut you off 17 minutes ago.
Well, I mean, I don't know. There's little like side roads I saw we could have taken. I can go on.
Yeah, whatever.
I could go on forever. I mean, it's just.
I'm sorry though. There's so much history in this area that I grew up in, and that you don't know probably a lot of these names.
That's fine.
But it shows how important the area was. And just actually talking about what you were talking about earlier, like you also had my father came in and played.
Oh, that was great. And I sometimes think about that and could kick myself because I wasn't really sometimes savvy about certain things. So your dad, sounds ridiculous, but we used to do this library fair. The jazz band would play at the library fair.
Oh, in Stone Ridge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
no, I played it. Sure, of course. Yeah.
And his dad one time came in and did it for me because I had something else that I couldn't be there for.
Oh.
And I should have probably paid him. and sometimes I regret.
He never mentioned it. So.
Well, good, because I always felt like, well, that was stupid. Yeah. But I didn't think of it that way. It was like, well, he's a dad. So, and he was happy to do it. You could tell when he came in, he was really happy to do it. And I was happy watching him because he was smiling. And
well, I remember that like it was yesterday. He came in and played lead alto on it was Goodbye Pork Pie Hat.
Oh, yes.
He played so it was an alto feature for whoever was playing alto in the band.
Yes.
But I remember playing that tune with you, or playing the arrangement in the band room, and realizing like then and there, like, oh, he's pretty badass. Like I had grown up. Yeah,
you had heard him. Yeah,
I had grown up in situations where I heard him play everything that he was playing, but I had never worked on a piece of music with students and then had somebody come in and then play the part that was written and made it sound like a lead alto player. Yeah. And I remember sitting there going, oh, like I remember fully realizing then, like, oh, he's not just some guy that feeds us and buys us clothes. Like this dude was super bad. Like it was like a whole other realization, and it was in that band. Like it really totally changed me.
Your dad was wonderful. I mean, and I did one of the students. They had a thing called the WISE program.
Oh, sure.
I don't know if they still do, but one of the students was doing a recording. She was a vocalist, and so the recording was your dad and Mike Cull on piano.
Oh, is this Shira?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we did that recording, and
shout out to Eric Goldberg and
Eric Goldberg. And your father played flute.
Yeah,
on
I remember this recording.
And his father had a flute tone that was just, it would melt your heart. It was a beautiful. I mean, he had a great tone on everything, but when he picked up that flute and played, it was some kind of bossa, I guess, and it was just. I remember not really. I was kind of getting confused or distracted because that is so freaking beautiful.
And you were saying earlier, was it your brother who studied with the principal in the New York Philharmonic for tuba? Was that something you had said?
My dad.
Your dad.
My dad.
So my father studied with Harold Bennett, who was the principal flautist in the New York Philharmonic, I believe, and that would have been in the 60s.
Wow.
When he had to take flute lessons as a doubler. I don't know if it's got to still be a thing, but horn players, people who were playing Broadway stuff, but that, like, he was already in his 20s, and he was like, he knew in order to work more, he had to play flute, and so that's what he studied with.
Yeah.
So, like, when you said that earlier, I was like, oh, that's amazing, because
we tried to get our dad to play bass, so he could get more work.
Yeah.
But he didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
He didn't want to do that.
Yeah. So tuba might be in your future.
I have been told of gigs that I could potentially go for.
Sure, Dixieland stuff.
Well, I was told if I really went hard at tuba, there was time where I could have had a chance to audition for Chicago.
Oh.
Like on Broadway.
Yeah. Brad is also a stand-up comedian, and I can think of nothing more hilarious than playing
Oh,
tuba.
really? Wow. I'd love to see a show sometime.
I mean, I'm new. I've been doing it for like a year. I've only
My
done
oldest
like
daughter loves comedy shows.
Well,
So let us know when you're.
yeah, I mean, I do up in Albany. Like, I'm right now, it's just a lot of open mics, getting my reps in. But I've done 2 real gigs. So look out.
Okie dokie.
No, I suck. But I love stand up. And how do we get on that from tuba
You're
playing?
gonna buy a tuba, and you're gonna
It's just that's so,
incorporate it into your act.
well, I was a trombone player first.
What?
Like, I started playing bass like right before high school, and I was a trombone player since like 4th grade before that, and I was bad. I sucked. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd be in middle school jazz band, and we would do like a couple days out of the year where we'd be like, all right, everyone take a solo on this blues. And point to me, and I would just sit there and do nothing. Like, I had no idea what I was doing with that stuff. But I mean, honestly, tuba, because of that, tuba would probably be like one of the easier things for me to learn. But
Well, Brad is also a fantastic bassist. So so
I would imagine. I would imagine that it would be.
But those tuba groupies, man. I might have to go for it. I don't know.
Well, like we were talking about before, like Howard Johnson used to have a group called Gravity,
Mhm.
and it was I think 8 or 4 or 5 tubas or something. I mean, and talk about heavy metal.
Yeah. Nice. He's also the tuba player, I believe, on Schofield's Groovylation. Like, if you know that album,
I've heard it, but I didn't even realize it was.
He used to be the
tuba
leader on the Saturday Night Live band for a while. He did a stint there, and then later on he played in Levon Helm's group up at the barn.
Yep, and he also was on the band album High on the Hog.
Okay.
I believe that's Howard Johnson, because my father's playing saxophone on that, and I believe so was Eddie Hickes.
Wow.
That was a gig they did. That was a record from the 80s.
He had a great story that he told me when he was doing our all county group, because
Who's this, Howard?
Yeah, we had the rehearsals at the school.
Yeah.
So we were on a break, and he was telling me about how when he auditioned or interviewed for the Ray Charles band.
Okay.
He goes, yeah. So I walk in his office, and it's pitch dark. and Ray is sitting at his desk, and as my eyes got acclimated to the light, I realized there was somebody there.
Yeah.
And he said, sit down. And I wondered how he knew I was still standing.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that was his interview, and I said, boy, that's stuff that, little things that nobody would know unless you were there.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's also so cool. I mean, one year we had the Count Basie band come as a fundraiser to the school.
Really?
And that was a big deal.
Yeah, it is.
That was a very big deal. And everybody was excited. I mean, Bobby came to the concert because he knew some of the guys in the band. Mm-hmm. And I remember the music boosters put on a whole spread for the guys. Mm-hmm. And I had some stuff from the jazz ensemble on the blackboard, and one of the guys in the band said, You teach this stuff here? I said, yeah. He goes, wow. I guess he thought that was pretty hip.
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
Yeah.
And but I felt badly in one way, because they had specified the height of the risers on the stage, so we built a whole stage just for them, and the sound guys and everything.
Yeah.
But they wanted the grand piano on the stage, and we couldn't do it. It just was impossible.
Because of the weight or the size?
The weight, the size,
Yeah.
that thing. So we had this brand new, I think it was a Yamaha, and it was a really good piano. And I had it tuned, and the tuner came, that night just in case, and everything. But one of the guys was very, he got a real attitude, and I felt badly because he was really, you're giving this kind of a piano to the Count Basie band, and it hurt me because we had done so much work to make them feel comfortable and welcomed. And I remember I probably shouldn't have said it, but I said something to the effect like, well, if Count Basie was here, he'd be able to make this piano sound like any grand piano.
Ooh. That's about the best thing you could have said.
And I just walked away because I didn't know, I couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And, and it's still sounded great. It was so great.
In Accord, New York, in the 80s, you found probably the best grand piano for 150 miles. Yeah.
It was cool. But, but again, those are great times to be able to do some of that stuff because, the effect on the kids, when they see something like that, like because that trumpet section that he had at that point in time, they could go from subsonic jet to like whew, the quietest you could imagine. Yeah. And so when kids see that, like when people that really have a control over their instrument can do, it's like it helps them, it inspires them. Not necessarily they're going to do it, but they know it can be done, and it's something to think about, when they're playing.
So to bring this full circle, you're saying that music in the schools is important.
Oh God, it is. It really is. It's like anything else. It's not the most important, but it is very important.
To some people, it probably would. It is.
Yeah.
Though.
To some people, it is their. Like I said, it's their place. It's where they find something that they can't find anyplace else. I mean, I know it was for me. Mm-hmm. When I was in high school, it was, and it was only the last 2 years of high school that it really hit me because I was in Catholic school, and 10th grade. After 10th grade, I got kicked out of Catholic school. So
wait, here's a story. What happened?
No. We don't want to do that.
Now we're getting to it.
But I went to a public school, and it was so great because the band was so much better.
Yeah.
And bigger.
Yeah.
And my band teacher, it was kind of funny because my band teacher lived in a town outside of Syracuse called Lafayette.
Okay.
My father was the high school band director at Lafayette. Ah. So he taught my band director's kids, who taught in a city school district, Corcoran in Syracuse. And so Theron taught me and my sister, and not my brother, and then my dad taught his kids. So it was kind of cool. So
wow,
were you better than the other kids?
Huh? Were
you better than the other kids?
No, I don't know. In some things, maybe. I don't know.
I'm going to take that as a yes.
Some things, maybe. I mean, I think there were a lot of good kids in that group. And that was really my first jazz ensemble experience, and we didn't call it that. It was called the dance band.
Oh.
And we were doing some, those old charts, those small little, well, you probably haven't even seen one of those, but like for the bands that used to play at the dances, like in the 50s and stuff like that. And it was great. And my band director, that was, he was a great musician. He was also he was a trombone player by default. He went into Eastman School of Music because he wanted to be a theater organ major.
Okay.
There was such a thing back then where the talking movies hadn't come out yet.
Yeah.
So he went there as a theater organ major, and all of a sudden talking movies came out, and jobs for theater players were few and far between then. So he switched to trombone. So what I'm getting at is he was a great piano player, and I learned more about theory from him than I actually did from the high school teacher that taught theory.
Yeah.
And he would take some of us, after school, and we'd sit there and he would plunk out stuff on the piano and show us how voicings could work. And it was just, one of those eye-opening things.
Yeah, having somebody who uses it be able to show you how it's used is
he was great. He was like, we became good friends, and he actually taught me how to drive. I used to have to move his car from one parking lot to the other because he taught in 3 different schools in the city. So he would come to the high school for a certain amount of time. Then one day he was at another school, because they would move music teachers around. And he was just a great guy.
And also bringing that full circle, you would go on to drive Bobby Johnson around.
Well, yeah, I guess so.
You know, my first bass teacher taught me how to walk.
Oh,
I get it.
now, are you sure you want to go to this show?
Well, hopefully you'll have better material by then.
That was pretty good. Actually.
That was good.
And to bring it even fuller circle, is I was in your band, and then I was fortunate enough to have Brad in a band when you were a freshman in college. So,
wow, that's great.
It kind of, yeah.
It's kind of like a living, well, it's like music itself.
And then we're doing a gig. We got a gig next month.
Music itself is an oral tradition, really, and teaching is kind of that way. I mean, what you gave him, he will eventually give someone else.
Herpes.
Oh,
wait. Sorry. Sorry, that was terrible. I'm sorry.
You're right. This is a lot of fun.
Infectious. This is infectious music.
Well, Pfizer will come out with a vaccine, I'm sure.
Well, I think they have it.
Oh, okay.
I forget what it's called. There's commercials for it.
Good.
Right at the dinner time hour. I forget what it's called. Something tracks. It's called. Yeah, there is. Anyway, we don't have to get on this.
Yeah.
Brad's trying to pretend like we don't know what we're talking about.
No, I just watch Netflix. I don't see the commercials.
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness, because the side effects will kill you.
Well, what do you think? Do you think we got to the bottom of it today? Was there anything we left out that you might have wanted to talk about?
No, I mean, this was a lot of fun.
This was a lot of
good
fun.
Time.
So it was great remembering some things and forgetting some things.
It's it's the importance of it. Just the whole. There's a family kind of aspect to all of these different musicians that you meet over the years, and then all of these students that you were fortunate enough. Then they were fortunate enough to have you for those years, and you look back on it. It's like there's a lot of branches that have a lot of different pathways that seem to open up from those early experiences.
In my head, I'm thinking this is you're an adult.
Not according to my wife.
Not when I first met him, he was like an adolescent.
Yeah. That was 17, 16, 17 years old.
Kid.
So that's what your wife is into, pretending you're an adolescent?
It's not your business, sir.
But to see where you've gone, that's a very nice. It makes me feel good, like you really took the ball, and ran with it.
Well, I was going to also say, like, growing up, your band room was absolutely a refuge, and it's not as if I had a very stable home life. I was surrounded by constantly by musicians and artists coming in and out of the house.
I bet.
And so it wasn't necessarily a place for escape, but it was a place for sort of blossoming, I guess. There was air. There was you were nurturing, you were encouraging, like all the things to just feel like, let's just enable the fun aspect of what music is, the social part of it, the joking around part, the camaraderie that happens with a band, and if we had a class that we didn't necessarily want to go to that day, we could definitely I found myself in that band room quite often, and whether I don't remember the whole reading in a book, but that's definitely I worked on guitar a lot, so I knew I'd rather do that than sometimes go to history class. I'm not saying that you encouraged us to be delinquent, but we could go there, and we still were doing something positive, and you enabled that, like you were a conduit to that.
I got very good at forging my band director's signature for passes, and it worked quite a few times.
I didn't want to say the word passive, but I remember there being I do remember that, and that means a lot. It was about the music, and but it was like you said, it was about people being able to enable them to hang out and have fun. And I have nothing but positive feelings and memories from turning the corner and walking into the band room. Now it's different because they redid that. Yeah,
they did. Yeah, it's a whole new thing.
It's a whole new thing. But I remember being back there, and I remember playing and enjoying the charts and being around everybody in there.
I felt badly too because Nancy Ostrovsky did a beautiful painting for me on the back wall, and it was Bobby Johnson, Pearl Bailey, and Louis Bellson.
Oh.
And I should have had her do it on a piece of plywood that I could have taken with me.
Oh, it's on the actual wall.
Yeah, so I think when they did the renovations, it just got destroyed.
Nancy's a wonderful painter, and she'll go to concerts and paint while the concert's happening.
Yeah, we did a few of those at the school, and the kids loved it too.
She lives right over that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And have you ever stopped at the market in Stone Ridge?
No.
She did the whole outside
whole wall,
walls.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
all it's all musicians. She like painted the walls, and I think they sold that place, but it's still there.
They kept that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very-
Yeah. Yeah.
Very,
A lot
very
of
creative.
Yeah, a lot of interesting. That's too bad that you lost that. That there's nothing you could do about that. They
No.
renovated the whole thing.
No.
They put a new wing on there or something, right?
Yeah, which was good.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah. Well,
We did it.
we did it. We did it again. Fooled him again, Larry.
Okay, good.
Unless you got any last back pocket stories to get Larry crying, I think we got the goal.
Oh, just to pull out the emotional?
No.
I don't think so. I think we're all. I got nothing but happy feelings coming out of there.
Good.
Yeah, all right.
Good.
That's great meeting you, Larry. Thanks for coming on. I mean, it's
thank you. It's
talk
great to
about
meet you, too.
education and I mean music in general.
Oh yeah,
I love talking about it.
it's a good thing.
It is a good
It's
thing.
a really good thing.
So thanks for doing it. I appreciate you coming by and having the conversation with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
This has been. It was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be.
See, you thought you were going to have nothing to talk about. Turns out we got a lot. This was all the legal stuff you got to talk about.
Right,
We'll do
yeah.
part 2 for
The X-rated version.
the X-rated version. Yeah, well, you'll cry on that one. We'll definitely make you cry on that one. We good?
Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you to Larry Blesh for coming out. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and rate. Is that the sign off?
Yeah, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere.
The Mink
Help
and the
us. We will do our best for you. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah, and then we do the.
Nope.
Let's all get it together. Ready?
Thank you.